With The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live's showrunner Scott Gimple's latest comments on Rick and Michonne's potential return, I really got to thinking about how I would really like to see those characters return. And in a Q&A video the other day, actually, I was asked a question in terms of, could we ever see Rick and Michonne's wedding? And I started to really think, like, could we ever see that? And what if it was actually in like an episode 1 of a new series with Rick and Michonne? What else could happen in that episode? And I started to think about a lot of other story aspects that, we're missing from The Ones Who Live that I would really like to see in a new series here before you get to the whole Rick and Daryl reunion, because I do think that there's a lot of stuff that people want to see before we actually get to that, because I think you do got to build up to a moment like that. So yeah, I do want to get into my thoughts on all of this. So before going further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. Dead City Season 2 is going to be coming out in less than 2 months now. I am expecting the actual trailer to be coming out probably next week, I'm assuming. It's roughly around 40 days, around there, maybe more, before the show actually premieres. And so I'm expecting at some point next week. Maybe the first day of spring, I could totally see that. Obviously when it does come out, I'll do a breakdown or in-depth breakdown of everything, get into all the excitement for the season and everything. But as I was saying, Scott Gimple's comments recently about Rick and Michonne's return, it was just really exciting to think about what that potential first episode could really be like. And the one thing that I think makes a lot of sense is I do think the first episode should focus on, everything being very happy. And it's Rick and Michonne's return to Alexandria or the Commonwealth, right? I'm not entirely sure where I would like Rick and Michonne to be, because I think you could make the argument for really either place. Like, going back to Alexandria makes a lot of sense because Carl's grave is there, right? Like, that was sort of their home as well. It would be very familiar for Rick, but maybe they want to start somewhere new, so they go to somewhere like the Commonwealth, and like the Commonwealth is a really big place, so it's not going to be in a similar place to what we saw, at the very end of the Walking Dead, like the final season. So it would be a place owned by the Commonwealth. You could argue that Alexandria is now a part of the Commonwealth as well, so it really depends on where they want to go with the story here. But I think for me, somewhere close to Alexandria would be kind of nice. I think that for Rick and Michonne to want to go back there and to see how amazing the place could be, I think it would just be honestly really incredible to see overall. I think that for the characters, for everyone watching as well, to see Rick back in Alexandria, I think would be incredible. Even if they don't want to go back there, I think that just having Rick, in a scene in the very first episode back in Alexandria would be very cool, whether he's just visiting or whatnot, right? Because I think that this first episode should really feel like a celebration, because I think that was one of the things about The Ones Who Live's finale is, as much as I really liked them reuniting, there wasn't enough of it. There wasn't enough build-up in that finale to like really deserve the ending, in the sense that everything felt easy in terms of, how they accomplished everything in that episode. And so I think obviously having an extra episode or two would have really helped, just like really flesh out the villains there. And obviously a lot of like conflict and issues happening, when they went back to the CRM base to where they eventually got to in the ending, and then maybe just sort of flesh out a little bit more of the reunion scene. And like not have them just reunite in a field where things are just very open now to like where they can actually go, right? Because it's sort of how the ending felt, was like, okay, they reunited, awesome, but like there's still so many questions unanswered, and like, where are they going next? Maybe that was intentional because of where they want to do the next story, and like maybe if things changed, they could obviously like change certain story ideas and like go in this different direction now. But I still think in terms of that first episode, doing something that feels like a celebration of like Rick and Michonne are back now, it would be really amazing. That the feel and tone of the show, or this first episode, could really be similar to A New Beginning, which was the season 9 premiere of The Walking Dead. That was really incredible, honestly. After a couple of years of just a lot of like, all out war and all of that, it was really cool to see Alexandria in a totally different place after all of what they went through in The Ones Who Live, and Rick being gone for so long. To have Rick and Michonne back, and like, we see their new life with their children, some returning characters showing up, I think having that celebration feel would be really perfect for the first episode. It would really service The Ones Who Live. And I think, for those that believe that that was like the perfect ending for the characters, I really definitely disagree with that, but some believe that that was the perfect ending for Rick and Michonne. And so I think if it's been a few years since that ending, just seeing how Rick and Michonne are now, all these years later, what their life is like, and focus on celebrating The Ones Who Live's ending and setting up this new story here. there's also some other things that I would really like them to get into right away, because obviously the one criticism that a lot of people had about The Ones Who Live was like, Rick never really mentioned things about like Daryl, right? Like wondering, where is Daryl? Like how did Daryl react to like when I was gone? Or just like, how did everyone respond? What were things like afterwards? Like there's just so many questions that he never asked. Like, you know, like about the Whisperers, like obviously he wouldn't ask about that, but like maybe Michonne talking about some of the stuff that they were going through. And like, wouldn't Michonne be really concerned about what was happening back then? I know she sort of heard that, you know, they were dealing with the Whisperers and like, you know, they were all going to be good with that. But like, still, like you would still wonder, like, are they actually for sure good, like with the Whisperers? Like, are they gone? There's just a lot of questions that I have in terms of all of that there. Like Michonne doesn't know anything about the Commonwealth, and seeing them adjust to a lot of that, you know, I think, again, I would just like to see a lot of things that were set up in The Walking Dead, a lot of things that happened to Judith and RJ at the very end there, and like all the other characters, I guess, brought up by Rick and Michonne, and specifically Rick wondering where Daryl went. I think that that is something that honestly is, it's something that's kind of frustrating, because like Daryl's story since Rick apparently died has been like, you know, trying to find Rick. Like, even though everyone believed he was dead, he just never did. Then eventually found out, oh, actually, he still could be out there. Daryl went out there to try and find him. And now, obviously, he's in France. And, like, literally his story has been, I'm trying to bring Rick home, right? So I think Rick wondering, like, where is Daryl? It makes so much sense, and that should be what he's focused on right now. Like maybe there's still some other like things that he's got to do with the CRM, because obviously he wants to focus on family life, help out the CRM in some way, help out other communities and all of that. But like, I feel like Rick should, you know, really feel like, okay, I should really bring Daryl back home because he went out there to try and find me. You know what I mean? So I think Rick wondering, where's Daryl? And sending out some of the CRM, you know, I guess military out there to try and find him. And all of that makes a lot of sense. Like the fact that Daryl is in Europe as well is just like perfect, because it's not going to be that easy to try and find Daryl, right? Like they're probably going to look everywhere. Maybe it really looks like Daryl actually died or something like that, because they have no idea where he went. Carol's also gone. So maybe Rick is just like, what happened to them? And like maybe in that first episode, we see something where Rick is just like, I don't know, maybe he mentions that he sent the CRM out there to try and find Daryl and they found nothing. And he's just like, you know, stressed out about it. And he's worried about Daryl. And then Michonne's just like, it's all right. Like, you know, he's got to be out there. Remember, it's Daryl. Like, he's all right kind of thing, right? But we see Rick, you know, just very worried about it. A scene like that would be absolutely incredible, because it shows that Rick is worried about Daryl. And since Daryl's not going to be back for some time, because the show's obviously set in Europe, and I imagine that show is going to be, you know, going on for a few more seasons, probably like season 6, I'm expecting. And so by the time he comes back, it'll be a few years from now. And so maybe, I mean, it's set around the time where season 2, or not season 2, but a new series with Rick and Michonne would be set with everyone much older. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But let's actually talk about that aspect to this. So when would this new series be set? Because the timeline for all of the shows is it's very out there, right? Like Dead City is a couple of years into the future. The Ones Who Live is about the same time as The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, but obviously that show is going to be going on for a while now. They're not coming back to America anytime soon. So that's also going to be set in the future at some point. I imagine season 3, it's going to be a few months after The Ones Who Live, or maybe longer. I mean, at any point, these shows are probably, I think that's the thing. All of these shows are going to catch up, I believe, to Dead City's timeline, because I think that if you're looking at the actors who play like RJ and Judith, like they're going to be getting a lot older over the next couple of years. Like they're not going to be able to set the story in the current timeline or anything like that. Judith and RJ are probably going to be like around 20 years old or somewhere around there, right? By the time they actually do this next story here, especially if you're trying to catch up the story with Dead City. Like I think that makes so much sense. So I think that this story would have to be set around the time of, yeah, I mean, again, Dead City. I think maybe a little bit after Dead City. I think there's a reason why Dead City is set so far into the future. I think that is where The Walking Dead's overall story is going to be set in, especially for the Endgame series, because by the time Dead City is done, I think that, you know, everything will be set around that time. So I just think it overall makes a lot of sense that we're going to catch up with that timeline, and all of the shows will be set at some point after Dead City, like when they all reunite kind of thing. I think around there makes a lot of sense. Episode 1 should focus on the wedding for Rick and Michonne. Now, I was asked this in a Q&A video the other day, and it was honestly something that I was really just never thought of too much, because I guess we never really saw them get married ever. And obviously I feel like maybe they wouldn't want to celebrate something like that. And I think maybe after a few years, like maybe something is mentioned in the first episode where RJ or Judith just sort of say like, well, you guys have never been married or we never actually really celebrated anything. So let's actually do that. Like, let's do that. And so maybe the first episode is focused on setting up something like that. And maybe RJ and Judith are setting everything up, you know, and Rick and Michonne are just like really excited about everything. Maybe we have a lot of characters come back like Eugene, Jerry, Ezekiel, and just like everyone from the Commonwealth or Alexandria, right? Everybody's coming back. They're all very excited again. This would be very much like a celebration of Rick and Michonne and the fact that they came back to Alexandria or the Commonwealth. It's a celebration of the Ones Who Lives ending. And I think it would be the best way to set up this next story here to reunite everybody so that you're not completely ignoring the fact that there was a happy ending there, right? And so this episode would be a very happy episode. It would be so amazing to see everyone. Again, a lot of returning characters. We could see sad moments like Rick going to visit Carl's grave, like after a lot of like really amazing, you know, happy, I guess, emotional moments throughout the episode. Maybe it's the night before the wedding, it's nighttime, and Rick goes back to Alexandria to visit Carl, and maybe he's saying a few things, you know, he's just really emotional. Maybe it's a very normal conversation. He just wants to have a conversation with his son. And so, you know, maybe he's having a hard time adjusting. Like, I think that's the one thing too that they could really explore here is just a lot of what Rick went through being at the CRM base. Like, he had a hard time adjusting and becoming himself throughout that series, and Michonne finally got back to him. But I think it would still be a really big shock to him to be back in Alexandria, to see everyone, and just to be back in like normal life again. And, you know, I guess just being here with Carl, maybe he just really misses his son still. I think that's one of the greatest things in terms of the writing for Rick Grimes is that they haven't forgotten Carl. Like, if you really think about Rick in general, like, he only had a couple of episodes after season 8, right, into season 9. And a lot of that was just focused on keeping Carl's, you know, story alive, his life alive in that sense. And then he really lost himself in The Ones Who Live, but he got really emotional, you know, when Michonne was bringing up stuff about Carl. And again, Carl is still very much a part of who he is. And so I think that, you know, that would be a really incredible scene to see, like all of these happy moments, but Rick is just like, as happy as he is, he's having a really hard time adjusting because maybe it's different now, right? And maybe he's still very happy. Everything's really amazing, but he also misses Carl, and there's just a lot of stuff that he's been through for a while. And so I think a really emotional moment like this, visiting Carl's grave, would be, I mean, obviously really emotional for a lot of fans, but it's something that maybe, you know, after this scene, he feels a lot better. And I think that it would just be a really incredible Rick and Carl moment to see, because also in the comics, Rick has a moment like this with Andrea. Like, after Andrea's death, he's very emotional and he's like laying by her grave and stuff like that at nighttime. And he's just struggling a lot. And we never got to see anything like that because, you know, that happens during the Whisperer War. And obviously he left the show before the Whisperer arc began. But I think getting something like that, you know, it'd be changed a little bit here because it would be with Carl, I think would be honestly amazing. This episode focusing a lot on the emotional stuff, building up to the actual wedding, you know, where I think the ending scene would be very, obviously everyone's very happy. And it's just like how you think a wedding or something like this would go. The music would be really incredible and everything. But like, obviously this is a new series, and where is the story going next, right? There's going to be some sort of drama. Something is going to come up. And that's where Morgan shows up, because where is Morgan, right? Morgan, we saw at the very end of Fear the Walking Dead, said that he was wondering where Rick was, that he was going to go and look for him and everything. And so obviously maybe a lot of stuff came up. Maybe there's a new villain or a different story. There's something else that happened to the character that it took a lot longer for him to actually come back home to Alexandria, but he actually made it back now. And maybe the ending to this episode here is Morgan shows up, and then we get this really incredible scene of Rick and Morgan staring at each other, and it's like this epic stare down that obviously has happened before, but it would just be so cool to see like a really crazy cliffhanger of Rick and Morgan just like looking at each other, and it would just be like, wow, they actually like reunited. And obviously Morgan would be in a really bad place. Like, maybe there's stuff with the CRM, or maybe it's like Dead City's story is sort of, you know, combined with this a little bit here, or it's something entirely brand new. I think it would just be really incredible. Honestly, I think having the story like this would just be so great as a first episode. And overall, we know that Rick and Michonne are going to be returning at some point, right? Like, it does seem like in terms of them reuniting with the other characters that it's just something that you have to do. But how is it going to happen? Is it going to be in a new series? Are the characters going to show up on Dead City or like The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon? I think that in terms of Rick and Michonne being on like those shows and just like showing up randomly, I don't think that's going to happen. I honestly think that like maybe Dead City. I could totally see Dead City because of the location, but I think for Daryl Dixon, it's just a little bit too much. And to have the reunions of all these characters happen separately, but like both shows are going to end in the same way with the characters reuniting with Rick, it's not going to happen like that. That's too predictable. I think that in terms of Rick and Michonne's next story, with Morgan being out there as well, it makes so much sense that there is another story here to tell. I really do feel like there's 2 more stories left to tell with Rick and Michonne, where we have Rick and Michonne back in Alexandria. We can see Rick adjusting to everything and just like what life is like now, you know, reuniting with Morgan. And then there's the last story in terms of him reuniting with Daryl and obviously reuniting with like Maggie and Negan as well. Getting everyone back together. Like, I think that that's sort of where I see The Walking Dead ending over the next however many years here. Like, I think that that's going to be where the story goes here over the next like 5 years. I really do feel like it makes a lot of sense for the story overall. And again, I think that going into an endgame series right now makes no sense. It would be rushed because there's not a lot of setup here. There's some stuff that was mentioned. Daryl Dixon season 2 got into the fact that Laurent and Ash are going back to the Commonwealth. There's some stuff that is being set up here. I'm really excited to see where Dead City season 2 is going to go, because obviously that's really going to be getting into, you know, the state of Manhattan and what's the world like overall. There's a lot more episodes there too. So I'm really curious as to how the world is going to be set up now, because I remember Gimple saying that in terms of everything else like that, like he just really wanted to focus on getting these shows up and running. So I think the first seasons of Dead City and Daryl Dixon really just focused on setting up those worlds. And there was not really, you know, a focus on like crossovers or anything like that. But getting into season 2, they're going to be, you know, starting to do that now. And we saw that with Daryl Dixon season 2, which is really exciting because Dead City season 2 is probably going to set up a lot more stuff with that too. So anyways, I'm going to leave it here. Definitely post your thoughts down below on, I guess, some of the stuff that I was mentioning here. Are there things that you would change? Are there things that I didn't mention that you would actually like to see in a first episode of a new series? What would you like the villains to be? Because I think that that's something that would be kind of hard to figure out. I mean, you would have to have like the character stuff, right? I think that in terms of where Rick and Michonne could go, there's a lot that they're able to do there. Like just Rick adjusting to everything and all the characters he could reunite with, what the story could actually be. Like there's a lot they're actually able to do there. So in terms of the character stuff, like that's not really a concern at all. Like there's a lot of places that they're able to go. So that makes a lot of sense. But the villains and everything, I think that would have to be something entirely brand new, or maybe Dead City season 2 is going to be setting that up with Bruegel and New Babylon and whatnot. So we'll have to wait and see. But anyways, I'm going to leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.